Hi, my name is Kaylee, and you're watching the Youth Code Jam Bits and Bytes activity for this week. Today, we're going to be talking about online sources, specifically how to use them and which ones to use. So, we'll start off by defining what is an online source. So, an online source is a place online that gives us information, materials, stuff like that. So, basically, anywhere on the internet that we find stuff for us to use. And well, when do we use these? You might use them to do schoolwork, pictures to do a homework assignment, or to write a report or a paper. Your parents might use them, or you might use them to learn about the news, looking at news websites or online newspapers, or to make good choices. So if you're looking up, what's the best like shampoo for my hair type, or what's the best place to eat, you might go to an online source for that information. A lot of people get games from online sources, things like the Play Store, like the Apple Play Store or the Google Play Store, places where you can get stuff to use. And I'm sure there are many more examples that you can think of online sources that you use probably on a regular basis. So, what should we be careful for when we're using online sources? Well, sometimes there is wrong information out there on the internet, and so we should be careful for that. We should be careful for plagiarism, which is what it's called when you use someone else's work without giving them credit. And we should also be on the lookout for some harmful websites, and we'll talk about each of these a little bit more in detail in just a second. So, how do I protect myself from wrong information when I'm using online sources? It's a good practice usually to check multiple sources. So if you can find the same information on several different websites, then you're probably good to go. Another option is to use trustworthy sources. So at the end of each website, there's a dot and then a couple of letters. Sometimes it's .com or .org. They're specifically .edu and .gov are typically trustworthy sources. .edu is at the end of websites used by educational things. So, like maybe your school or a college, and .gov and websites that are put out there by the government. And usually they try to like fact check their resources and things like that. So, when you see the three letters at the end, that tells you where the source is coming from. Sources like .com can be put out there by anybody, and so you should use some extra caution when you're looking at sources like that. Also, you can use some common sense. So I have two examples here of just like needing to, or of some of these. But yeah, so if the source says something that you know is probably not right, then trust your gut and go look at another source or a trustworthy source to see if that information is true. I have an example here of a sports article that I'm going to pull up that says grief psychologists say the best way to cope with death in the family is dropping 50 in an NBA game. And this article is essentially saying that shooting hoops is a great way to cope with death in the family. While it might work for some people, our trustworthy sources and checking multiple sources using common sense can lead us to maybe have some question marks about the source and question like, is what this person is saying true? And if you know anything about The Onion, theonion.com, which is where the source is from, this is actually a parody website, meaning that they put out news articles that are pretty false, just kind of for fun for people to read for enjoyment. So the information in this article shouldn't be used to help you cope with grief if you're really dealing with that. And so here's an example of a source that you have to you have to evaluate what you read here and think, does this make sense? And then also looking at the .com and thinking, maybe I should check this information somewhere else. Another example that I have is this one here. And this article talks about how this is what the Earth looks like, about how the Earth is a disk, and you've got planets, or not planets, excuse me, continents that look just like this. And if you've seen a map before, typically the continents don't look like this on the maps that you may have seen in school. And so that would be an example of using our multiple sources and trustworthy sources, like information taught to you at school. that you might say, well, maybe this isn't right. And if you investigate a little further, you might realize that this article is on a website called Flat Earth Society that believes that the Earth is flat. And that's generally not the explanation that a lot of scientists will go with. And so, whether that's something that you subscribe to or not, you should check multiple sources when you're looking for information like that, because sometimes there are a lot of different opinions out there. So now on to plagiarism. Plagiarism, remember, is when you take someone else's work or use it and you don't give them credit. So if I'm using someone else's work, which is usually okay to do, how can I make sure that I don't plagiarize? Well, one important thing is understanding fair use. And so fair use means that you can reuse something that another person has created in certain amounts and for certain purposes without breaking the law. So if you're doing like a class report, or if you're making a video for your friends, it's probably okay to use a little snippet of somebody's work. But you couldn't, for example, like publish Taylor Swift's new song and say that you came out with it yourself, or take a picture from the internet and say that you took it. Typically, you want to give credit to the person who created the source. And so that brings us into knowing how to give credit. Sometimes it depends on the context. Sometimes naming your source is okay, like saying, I got it from this place. Sometimes you want to add a link like this that can take people to where that source is so that they can use that source too and give that source credit for the stuff that they gave you. And there are also things called citation machines, which you'll use a lot in school as you go along. And so if I click on this link, it's going to take me to the citation machine. And what a citation machine is basically a really cool tool where you can put in the name of whatever you want to cite, and then it will tell you how to cite it correctly so that you don't plagiarize. So you can choose if you're trying to cite a website, a book, a journal. There's lots of different things here. A lot of this is typically probably going to be stuff you use at school or at work, but there are lots of different options here. That way, you know, even if you're not sure how to give credit, typically a citation machine can help you to do that correctly so you don't plagiarize. It's always good to give people credit for the work that they do, since it's nice when we get credit for the work that we do, and we want to give the same courtesy to others. So the last one that I mentioned about being careful with online sources is protecting ourselves from harmful websites. There are websites out there that might do damage to your computer, or might try to do damage to your computer, or just like have the intent to harm you or show you things that you're not supposed to really see, or trick you into something. And so these are some good things to think through when you're looking at a website that might potentially be harmful. You might think, is what they're saying too good to be true? Are they promising me a free vacation to the Bahamas that I didn't win? That seems kind of sketchy. Are they asking too much information about me? Are they asking me to put in, my birthday and my first and last name and my address in order to sign up for this website? Maybe they don't need to have all of that information. That can be kind of dangerous. Does the website look weird? A lot of really low budget, harmful websites might have typos, or like things might be crooked, or it just looks kind of weird. And you'll just kind of use common sense to think, like, does this website look normal, or is there something off about it? And then you can use this metric of how I heard of this website before. Now, it's cool to find new websites about new things, but we should be a little extra cautious when we're on new websites. If you're going to a website you've been to a lot of times before, like, for example, YouTube, or maybe Wikipedia, a lot of people use those websites all the time. And so maybe you can be a little bit more certain that the website will be safe for you to go on, because you've seen it a lot before. But if you haven't seen a website a lot before, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It just means that you should be careful and look out for some of these other things. So here's an example of a website that just looks weird and is maybe trying to harm your computer. And so like maybe it'll have a lot of like random pop-ups that are coming up and trying to scare you into like clicking different buttons, or maybe your computer made these pop-ups come up because the website was trying to do something to your computer. So if you see a lot of chaos like this, maybe double check that the website you're using might be harmful and maybe you should leave. Here's another example of a potentially harmful website. I don't actually know if this website specifically is harmful, but the kind of get rich quick scheme that it outlines seems kind of sketchy to me, where I get to sign up for free and I get rewarded. Lots of free, and it wants me to enter in my information here. And I'm not really sure what they're going to do with my information. So before you sign up for anything like this, maybe ask an adult, maybe read the privacy policy, or maybe just don't do it. Typically, things like this that promise you money for basically nothing are too good to be true. Otherwise, everyone would be using them. So just be extra cautious with things like that. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you learned a little something, or these were some good reminders about safety with online sources. I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching.